I think firstly we're waking up to the fact that consumers have limited attention, particularly the younger generation, and we really need to earn that attention and really be respectful of that attention. And that means thinking about how we can create empathy with the consumers and really look at it from their point of view. So that means we really need to think about not just what we could do, but what we should do. And I think therefore understanding context and the nuances of context are really, really important in that. And I think one of the things that's driving that as well is actually the data available. That means that we can actually move from stereotypes about context to really get to really understand it. So for example, things like Gardener's World might have had a very limited view, and people might view that as a little old lady in England. That's not necessarily the case. In fact, actually it might appeal to a much broader audience for a number of different reasons who might not publicly declare those reasons. And I think that really understanding context at its heart can really help us develop much more valuable consumer experiences.
Are there any tools or platforms that you're working with or that the agency has created to sort of dive deeper into what context really means?
I think there's a number of elements of how we've actually brought context to life in our planning process, looking at it through a lens of content, context, culture, what the communication is meant to do. And that's created a framework for really thinking about how we can develop consumer experiences. That feeds directly into our decision profiles, of how we think about how the context matters, and then feeds our communication plans. So it's quite a rigorous process to really make sure that we actually think about context correctly, applying the data, but really looking at it through a consumer lens and really thinking about what can we really understand and how can we use media as a strategic lever within that.
So that's an interesting segue, because context is one of the ways that advertisers, decide whether to run on a specific site or a TV show or something like that. But on the media end, sometimes concerns about brand safety can create a missed opportunity. How are you advising clients to use context to make smart media decisions?
We're giving a lot of advice to clients in terms of how they should make smart media decisions by really looking beyond the obvious. So really understanding what does that context say. So of course there's some particular news at the minute has been, is plagued with a number of uncertainties for consumers. But what we're trying to get them to understand is actually what beyond that, what else is available to really help build a richer consumer experience, and can you apply that data to really help manage your brand. So some of the brands we work with are very risk averse, and we understand that, particularly if, for example, they're going to younger audiences. So we have to create different guidelines and principles and make sure that our investment teams really understand that, so we can develop a really important experience for those consumers. So it's really making sure that the brand and the consumer are both respected within that to deliver a really safe approach to consumer advertising.
And I think the last question would be, are your clients coming to you expressing interest in contextual, and are you having to educate them, or is it more in the other direction?
In terms of educating clients, a lot of the clients we work with are very sophisticated, but some not so much. Particularly you work as a global strategy lead, you're working across a number of different markets. So it's really about helping consumers and our clients understand where can they push that lever. So some of them particularly increasingly understand that actually it's a great instrument to drive context at scale. And that moves us particularly into the bigger industry thinking of how we can actually drive reach, but create a much more valuable experience. So really, they get that, and we can actually really work across different platforms, different publishers, and it's moving beyond a ratings issue to really think about what is the underlying experience that we're delivering there, and how can we really play to that.